as someone now, me, I'm 48, or other people that are kind of see this coming up in their life, okay, I'm coming to this weird age, what are some of the things that maybe we should be proactive in doing or recognize about ourselves, including, potential depression or, the suicide rate goes up, or ways that maybe we reinvent ourselves or rethink it or put a perspective on this whole part of our lives?
Well, let's go back to talk about the U curve of happiness and why from 45 to 52 it is a low point generally. It's for a few reasons. Number one is there's the accumulation of so much. So the first half of your life is about accumulating. You accumulate relationships, romantically and otherwise. You maybe accumulate kids. You accumulate responsibilities. You accumulate jobs and a resume. You accumulate community responsibilities. You accumulate stuff materially. So by midlife, you've been in the accumulation mode, and then you're almost weighed down with so many identities and wearing so many uniforms and so many almost mindsets that you're sort of worn out. And frankly, there's very little space in your life. And so what happens is people are sort of like, what the hell did I sign up for here? And so while it's been called midlife crisis, Brené Brown, famous social psychologist, has called it the midlife unraveling. I call it the midlife edit, because I think the first half of your life is about accumulation and the second half is about editing. So if you really start to realize as you move into your 40s, here's the good news with millennials, is millennials are better at editing earlier. So we've sort of I've grown up with the 3-stage life. You learn till you're 20 or 25, you earn till you're 65, you retire till you die. That model is gone, but it was the model that I grew up with. And so the good news with millennials is they sort of have done their editing along the way, so they may not have as much of a crisis. But for a lot of people, it's their 40s when they actually have to ask the serious question, that's defined by the equation disappointment equals expectations minus reality. Where are my expectations of where I was, and where's reality, and where's the disappointment? Because the 40s are where a lot of disappointment sort of rests on people's laps. So you start to actually say, what am I needing to edit? What you did this 8 years ago, saying I don't want to be a banker anymore. That's not the life I want. You were ahead of the game in the sense that you did it at age 40. A lot of people they have to get to their 40s. This is when divorce happens a lot. This is when a lot of things change. People need to sort of have enough awareness along the way. It's helpful to be aware along the way. Are you on the right path? Because if you wake up one day and feel like, damn, I'm climbing the wrong mountain, to sort of use a David Brooks' second mountain analogy, then you get frustrated if you feel like I've wasted some time here. So asking questions and having the self-awareness about am I living my life the way I want to is really important. But a second piece is to really start to realize, what is it that I need to edit out of my life? What is no longer serving me? We have an exercise at the Modern Elder Academy, which I'll talk about that in a little bit, where we actually have people wear name tags. Like the very first 24 hours of there's an exercise where they go to a table and there's a bunch of mindsets and ways of thinking and identities on the table that could be anything from the best, my best years are behind me, to I don't want to try something new, to I feel invisible, to I feel lonely. And people put them on themselves. And, or, a good one is, I'm responsible for everybody around me. And people wear these, up to 6 of them, and then we go around silently and put people, stare at each other and then look at these and then stare at each other again, give each other a hug and then move on. And then over the course of that time, by the end of that afternoon, we say, which of these mindsets or identities are no longer serving you? And we have everybody on their own private piece of paper write down what it is in their life that is no longer serving them, that they need to edit or evolve out of. And that afternoon, we go to the fire pit, and one at a time, privately, each person takes their piece of paper and throws it in the fire pit while at sundown, right, at sunset. And it's a ritual that helps people to understand, yes, you don't live the afternoon of your life the way you live the morning. Carl Jung's paraphrase there that the fact that, yes, midlife and later is different. And if you want to play on the playing field of your body and your looks the rest of your life, you can. And there's beautiful YouTube videos about people at age 92, running a marathon. I love it. But if you spend the rest of your life thinking that everything is about your body and your looks, you will miss out on this great, beautiful opportunity of when the happiness starts to come up again in the second half of life, when you actually start to realize the things you leave behind may not have served you, and there are new things you can focus on. And generally speaking, the playing field of your second half of your life is not your body and your looks, it's your heart and your soul. And once you move to that place, miraculously, you feel less weighted down and ready to start to evolve into a new kind of person. And people say, I want what that guy has, or that person has, or that woman has.
Do most people get there on the happiness, or do you have to make concerted choices and edit? Or will things get edited out for you, whether you like it or not?
There you go. It's not like everybody's so self-aware and everybody goes to workshops and they go to like the Modern Elder Academy and it all gets better. No. By circumstance, and often by tribulation or just like awful things, people have to change their expectations. And it's in their 40s and 50s when people often downgrade their expectations and downgrade the way they're looking at their life, and that's how they actually cope. Unfortunately, for some people, that means they just narrow their focus. There's Carol Dweck from Stanford, psychologist, has a theory about mindset, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. What she basically says is that you can either be in a fixed mindset, which means that you're trying to prove yourself. And so you tend to do things that you know you're going to win, you know you're going to succeed at, because basically success is defined as winning. So that's how many of us live, because you want to actually feel like you're competent and successful at something. Yeah. As you get older, especially if you're playing on the same old playing field, the number of things you think you're going to be good at and you can prove yourself at actually starts to narrow, and then your life narrows. She also says is there's the growth mindset. And a growth mindset is not about proving yourself, it's about improving yourself. So the definition of success is not winning, it's learning. And so I'm 58, I'm learning how to surf. I'm not very good at it, but I'm trying. I'm learning Spanish. I live in Mexico half the time. I better learn Spanish. One of the great questions any of us can ask ourselves, and I rarely say this to people, so I'm really glad I'm saying it now, because I think it's so beautiful at any age. Ask yourself 10 years from now. For you, you'd be my age. Yeah. For me, I'd be 68. What is it 10 years from now that you would regret if you didn't learn it now? What's something you really need to know 10 years from now that you could start learning now? This is a way to get curious about what is it that's going to serve me in the future. It also goes toward that growth mindset of saying, I don't want my life to get more and more narrow over time, because when your life gets more and more narrow, you get less curious and you get less interesting. And so
there's a great line in the movie Any Given Sunday where Al Pacino says, when you get old, things get taken away from you. And it just came to my mind. He says it.
Yeah.
And it's true. If you don't change your mindset, things will get taken away from you, and you become this one-trick pony, maybe then to no tricks.
And there's something to be said for that in terms of if the edit was by choice, but if the edit is by necessity and society sort of took it away from you, that doesn't feel good.
No.
And you actually then go into this downward spiral. And we all know people who don't fit the U-curve of happiness. They're 70 years old and they're cranky and they've sort of given up. And there's lots of people who fit that profile. But if you want to look at, do the Google search for U-curve of happiness, read Jonathan Rauch's book called the Happiness Curve, and you'll see this is across all cultures except for Russia.
Really?
Russia people are happiest after they die. I mean, it's a statistical anomaly, but it's sort of weird. But yes, there's a weird thing that people actually tend to get happier at the latest stage of their life, right before they die.
Why is that, you think?
I don't really.
Have you been there and spent much time there?
Okay, vodka. I don't know.
They die young too.
Yeah, I haven't been in vodka. I haven't been in Moscow. I haven't been in Russia since 1981. So.
Okay. So this U-curve exists across all cultures, and it's kind of like understanding it, knowing it's going to happen to you, and start being proactive in this. Think about the editing now, thinking about this growth mindset, and it really is life and death.
Yeah. Also think about it this way. I love this question. So my dad's 81 now. A year ago he was 80. He started learning how to scuba dive at age 60. He's now done 2,700 dives. And so he's done basically in the last 20 years, 2,700 dives. Amazing. So a year ago, I learned scuba diving 2 or 3 years ago, so I could go scuba diving with my dad. A year ago, we were in Indonesia scuba diving. Early in the morning, I went on an online longevity site and I threw in all of my information to see how long am I going to live till? And it came back and said, you're going to live till you're 98. So I went out and saw my dad. I was 57 at the time. And I said, so Dad, without telling him what I'd done, I said, Dad, how long are you going to live? My dad said, ironically, Chip, I'm going to live till I'm 98. I said, wow, that's really interesting. I just did this survey, online, and it says I'm going to live till 98. So I said, let's do the math, Dad. If we start counting at the age you became an adult, age 18, what percentage of your adult life is still ahead of you? And we did the math, and my dad, if we did the math that way, and he lives till 98, he's barely into the fourth quarter of his life at age 80. For me, my dad looked at me and said, Chip, look at this. If you're gonna live till 98,
You're halfway through your life.
at 57, I wasn't even at halftime.
Right.
When you start to do the math that way, and you realize that longevity, it may be a long-term trend, probably is a long-term trend, for people who, frankly, are prosperous. There are actually some evidence that longevity is actually going backwards for certain kinds of demographics. But if you're going to live longer, and in my case now, I'm 58, I'm at halftime of my life, hell yeah, I'm going to learn Spanish at 58 because I live in Mexico half the time. That is something 10 years from now, I will look back and say, why didn't I learn it sooner? Frankly, as a curious white boy, we're going to get to this, who grew up in Southern California, I grew up learning French in LA. Why did I do that? Well, ultimately it led me to calling my company Joie de Vivre, so I got one thing out of it, but I should have learned Spanish as a kid. Most of us don't learn a language after age 45 because it's harder when you get older. And that could be my little name tag that says, I don't learn it because it's too hard. Well, yeah, that's true. Doesn't mean you can't try.
Because trying to learn how to surf, it sucks some days, right? And you're like,
does.
this is really frustrating. And the natural tendency is to go back and mentor someone because you're good at that, right?
That's
Go
right.
give a speech, you're good at that,
Yeah.
and get those little rewards, but then you're not in the growth mindset.
When you're in the growth mindset, you're willing to try something new. There's a great book called It's Great to Suck at Something. And so I believe that's true because it's this element of saying, I'm not coasting in life. I'm trying something new. I'm open to looking like an imbecile. There's a word that isn't well known in the English language called liminal. To be liminal is to be actually in between two times. It's actually to be in transition. In biology, the liminality that we're most familiar with is the caterpillar to butterfly journey. The liminal stage is the cocoon. I actually sort of see life the way I've now spent enough time researching this, reading over 200 books on longevity and aging, having all these people come through the Modern Elder Academy, which we'll talk about. I actually believe life is a little bit like that metamorphosis of caterpillar to butterfly. We're a caterpillar storing up, accumulating, eating leaves, making sure we get plump. And then one day, around midlife, we start spinning a chrysalis, and in that chrysalis, frankly, we go into it, and that's midlife. And in midlife, it can be dark and gooey. If you open up a chrysalis for a caterpillar halfway through, it doesn't look like a butterfly. On the other side, there's this butterfly, this beautiful, colorful, flying, creature that actually comes out of the chrysalis. And you are this butterfly who's, frankly, seems like a different being, but the seeds of the butterfly were in the imaginal cells, imaginal discs of the caterpillar. If we use the U-curve of happiness as a way of thinking about our lives and realizing, yes, we hit a cocoon or chrysalis around midlife, it's a darker period, it's a bit gooey. And then on the other side, it actually gets better. So the narrative, the societal narrative about it just gets worse with time is actually not accurate on the personal narrative on many people. And if we start to realize, in fact, our brain gets better with age. It gets worse when it comes to recall, like memory, and how quickly you can actually think of something. But the thing that people don't know about the brain, and it's now been proven, is as it shrinks a little bit, the brain does, we do the left brain, right brain tango. And we actually get better at being able to synthesize things, basically get to the gist of something, or in essence, think holistically. When you think holistically, it means you can actually almost distill down, or to use the forest and the trees metaphor, a young person can see the trees and understands it, but someone can actually, when they're older, can buzz up to 30,000 feet and see the pattern. So we need to start helping the societal narrative around aging, not just help people understand that, yes, you can get happier, partly because you edit some things you don't like and you get clear on your expectations. But no, actually, some things get better. Your emotional intelligence gets better. Your ability to get the gist of something and think synthetically gets better. Crystallized intelligence increases. Your ability to actually be a better human gets better. So I say all of this only because we don't have this narrative in society.
Yeah.
And so generally speaking, the way we look at our lives is we hit this damn midlife crisis. We're not, the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, and then all the caterpillar looks forward to is becoming a decrepit caterpillar. When in fact, on the other side of it, there's actually an opportunity that is quite beautiful.
Yeah, and we've all met those elders.
Yeah.
And like, I remember I interviewed Jared Diamond, the guy that wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Love it.
And he was in my studio like 5 or 6 years ago, and he was like 70-something, maybe late 70s. And man, he was on fire. And I was like, what's next for you? I thought he was like, I'm gonna retire. He's like, I'm working on 2 books. And I was just like, God damn, that guy's crushing it. And I was just like, wow. I was like, he's on his game, and it was nice to see.
Peter Drucker.
Yeah.
You know Peter?
Yeah, of course,
So Peter Drucker, management theorist, really sort of helped to create modern management and business theory. Lived till his mid-90s. He wrote 40 books, 2/3 of them after the age of 65. He's the one who created knowledge workers, the idea of knowledge workers. One of the things he did every 2 years, late into his life, is he actually came up with a new subject that he wanted to become the world's leading expert on, or one of the world's leading experts, that had nothing to do with his day job, of being a business professor and author. So it could be Japanese ikebana or medieval war strategies. And he'd spend a couple years just lubricating his heart, mind, and soul on that subject. And what he found was the process of actually becoming really curious about something had so many collateral benefits to him. For me, I've taken that. For 10 years now, every 2 years, I've gone and said, I'm diving deep on a subject. Festivals were one of them. When I did my festival journey between Joie de Vivre and Airbnb and creating a festival website, I was interested by the fact that the more digital we got, the more ritual we seemed to need as a society. I was fascinated by emotions after I went through my dark period and had my flatline experience, but I was truly in a depression before that flatline experience. So how do I understand my emotions? That led me to writing a book called Emotional Equations, which luckily became a New York Times bestseller. So, I've been fascinated by hot springs. I love hot springs. So I spent a couple years just like studying hot springs. So right now, I've been fascinated by the subject of aging and longevity and wisdom. That led me to writing this book and creating this academy. So I think the idea that at any age, you can go out and become an expert in something with no collateral damage about learning about it. It's so much easier today to learn because of search engines and Google and all the ways we can learn. We don't have to go to a library if we don't want to. It's all there at our fingertips. So, I would just say, if you're feeling in your life a little lost and a little bit like maybe like the walls are closing in, go find a subject, anything. It doesn't have to have anything to do with practicality, and just say, you know what? I'm just going to spend the next month really understanding this subject,
right,
and see what happens in your life. Because the thing that's interesting about curiosity is that, one of the things that they've proven is that when someone's depressed, it's really a closing down that happens. And the curiosity is the exact opposite. It is an opening up.